Hi, my name is Cindy Rang and I'm here with my granddaughter Eliza, and today we're going to make a Chromebook cover. My daughter and I have owned and operated a busy quilt shop in Washington State for over 20 years. We have a retreat center, an active YouTube channel, and a large pattern line featuring our creations. My two sons work on machines. One daughter-in-law is our videographer and the other is a long-arm quilter. We are a family that love each other, we laugh together, and every once in a while we get some work done. We have a crew that are saints for their efforts at keeping us on track. Thanks for joining us on our wild ride. So I think that it's time to make a Chromebook cover, right?
Yes.
Because you carried this thing all over the place, right?
Yeah.
To Grandma Gigi's, to my house, to work, to home. And if you drop it, what would happen? It looks like it's pretty tough, but
it would probably just break if I...
It might just break.
If I dropped it too many times.
Yeah. So I think what we need to do is I have taken some measurements and we need to make a case today. You're going to do all the sewing yourself while I have coffee. And first we have to go shopping.
Yes.
Hi, Eliza. How can I help you?
I would like a half a yard of each of these.
Okay. For your Chromebook. Okay, great.
And
Change your mind on those. Okay.
a quarter of a yard for my scrunchie.
You got it.
All right, so you picked out your fabric.
Yes, I did.
You had to look at everything,
I did.
but you finally settled on
Monster High fabric.
Monster High because it took 2 half-yard cuts.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So let's remind everybody what they need. So the materials that you'll need for your Chromebook cover is a half a yard of fabric for the outside, a half a yard of fabric for the lining, a half a yard or a scrap of batting, and 4 inches of hook and loop tape or Velcro. Okay, so we've done our shopping. I've done my little figuring, but I just want to show everybody else. We are, of course, making a Chromebook cover. And we know that this particular Chromebook, and I think everybody's Chromebook, is going to be 12 by 8. And so what we're doing is our measurements are going to be 13 by 9. If you have an iPad, if you have a larger laptop, something else, you can easily modify this pattern just by adding an extra inch to both sides. So again, we're 12 by 8. So what we need out of our stuff is we're going to do one piece that is not, because our Chromebook was 8 by 12. So our piece is going to be, if we add 1 inch, it's going to be 8 plus 1 is
9 by 12.
12 plus 1 is 13.
9 by 13.
9 by 13. So all of our pieces are going to be 9 by 13. So what we might do, depending upon the age of the person, they might use a rotary cutter. We are not going to use a rotary cutter. Did I ever tell you the story about when Brianna cut off the tip of her finger with a rotary cutter?
No.
It happened. She was 8 years old. She was in a class at the fabric patch. I don't remember what I was teaching, but I told her she could take the class if she sat in the back and just listened and paid attention and didn't ask any questions. And so she said, oh, yeah, she could do that. So she was back there during the class, and I happened to look up, and I see her holding her finger like this. And I said, what's wrong? And she said nothing, but I could see that she was starting to cry. So I went back there, and sure enough, if you ever look at her finger, the corner of it, she cut off the whole corner of her finger. She had to go to the emergency room. So fortunately, one of the people who were taking the class at the time was Ann Mulkey, a friend of mine who's a nurse practitioner. And she took her up there, and you know what she did? Because you couldn't sew a little piece back on it, but guess how we had to get it to stop bleeding? Had to burn it. It's called cauterize. So they had to burn it. So anyway, all these horrible, gruesome stories about why we're not going to lop off any fingertips. So eventually we'll do some stuff with the rotary cutter. But for you, little missy,
Scissors.
scissors. So what I have done for you, just to make it nice and easy, is I have measured, what was our size?
9 by 13.
9 by 13. So we need one piece of batting that's 9 by 13. And then this piece over here is actually 13 by 15. You wouldn't have any way of knowing that because it wasn't any magic math, but it's because our Chromebook cover, we're going to put a little flap. Uh-oh, Lizzie didn't like that idea, but that's what we're going to have as a flap. All right, so you go ahead and cut right on the line. And I'll teach you, do you know how to, you want me to tell you the secret about cutting to cut straight?
Yes.
Do you know that there's a secret? And it's that if you hold the scissors up like this as you're cutting, there isn't anything to kind of help you to keep it straight. But if you have this riding along the side like that, it helps you to keep everything straight. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Kind of. So that if you're cutting like this, so that this is kind of riding along so that that stays on the top. So that all you're doing as you're sliding is you're sliding it forward and cutting the top. Okay, so I'll let you cut through there. Very good. Now I didn't notice. Do you stick your tongue out while you're cutting?
Yeah.
Well, it makes you cut straighter if you do. It's a thing. All right. So we have cut our 9 by 13 batting outside, inside, and our
13 by 15
batting
outside and inside.
Right. And that's it. These are the only pieces besides our 4-inch little Velcro hook and loop, whatever they want to call it.
Yeah.
That's all we need. So the other thing too is we should mention to everybody else that since we drew our lines, it's generally a good idea to do something that is sewing appropriate.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful not to ever use some sort of a marker with fabric that's not going to come off. All of our edges will be in the seam allowance, but why risk it, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do first is we're going to sew our little pocket. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our batting, and then we're going to put either our outside or inside. It's not really going to matter. And it looks like you cut this fairly straight. This will be our test. And we're going to put these right sides together, right? So right side and right side. We're going to put this here. I tend to sometimes sew without pinning, but we're going to have you pin. So we're going to put some pins here, but all we have to do is we're just going to sew across to the top. That's the only thing that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and go to the sewing machine. Okay, when a young person or a little person is using a sewing machine, there's multiple ways that you can do it depending upon their age. Now, Eliza is going to be 8 in a few months, so she probably could use a foot pedal. You can do a little testing just to see. Eliza also knows how to hit the button to just have the machine sew on its own, and then she hits stop, and she's used to that. The other option is just to use your hand for your foot pedal, keeping in mind that if you're doing that, then you're only guiding with one-handed. So we're going to try a couple different things because you're not really used to my sewing machine. And we'll just sort of see what happens. So all we're going to do is, Eliza, go ahead and just, let's pin that. I think you got one pin in there. Let's go ahead and put a couple other pins just to hold that still while you're sewing. Good. Perfect. One more. Very good.
Need one more at the end?
I think so. All in all the way, because you're going to pull those out while you're sewing. Now, when I was young, we used to sew over pins, and now they tell us not to do that. But so what we do is we'll sew right up to it and we'll pull the pin out. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll just sew this seam. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this right side out, right? So we're going to flip this. We're going to come over. We're going to go over to the iron, and we're going to press this like this. And then we're going to come back to the sewing machine. And the reason that we top stitch, because we've pressed this, and so it probably doesn't really need it. It just gives that nice little finished look. So it looks just really special. So we're just going to come up right along this edge and doing that same thing. We're going to go ahead and put your foot down. Press your foot down. And then you're going to do that same thing. Now, it is extremely important that you sew straight, because you're going to see this. Well, it's not extremely important, but you're going to see the stitches that you do. And so we're going to go ahead and keep our white thread in here, but you could put a decorative thread. I'm going to fix your thread. The other thing that you could do is you could do a weird decorative stitch up here. You could do all kinds of fun things if you want to, but what we're going to do is we're just going to do a nice little straight stitch. So whenever you're ready, and you know what happens if you sew crooked?
You're just going to see it.
That's right. You leave it and you say, I meant to do it crooked. You don't ever have to do any ripping. Go ahead and cut out. My grandma made me rip everything out. We don't rip. Okay. Oh, that is perfect. Look at that. You did fantastic. That is a nice straight stitch. All right. So we have our nice top seam on. So before we do anything else, it's time to put our little piece of Velcro on here. So basically it's going to go roughly right about there. So what we'll do is we measure down 3.5 inches, and that's just kind of your magic measurement. So 1, 2, 3.5 from this edge. And then I just go ahead and put a line, and this is that iron off pen that I like, and that just gives us a nice little line so we know where we're at. And then we find the center right here, which is, I'm going to put a pin in it so we can see it. And we find the center of our Velcro, which is right there. We're going to line that up right there. So we're right on our line, 3.5 inches down in the center, I'm going to put this pin. And now what you're going to do is you're going to top sew, and you're going to sew all the way around this Velcro. And this is one of those things where you're not sewing over the top of the seam, right? So you'll backstitch, come down all the way around, and backstitch when you end. All right. Perfect. Okay, we're going to go back and we're going to lay them all out to sew the whole thing together. Good. All right, so here is our pocket, and now we're going to layer everything together. So we've got our batting piece. We have our, let's see, Eliza, is this our outside or the inside? That's the outside. Okay, so that's going to be like that. And the pocket is going to be right on top of it. And then our inside, and if you have something that's directional, you'll want to pay attention to that here. And that's going to go on top. And then what you'll do is you just want to line up all of your outside edges here. Make sure that everything is where it needs to be. And then we're going to put 2 pins up here that are about maybe 5 or 6 inches apart. So we're going to put one here, and we're going to put one here. And this is going to tell us that that's where we're going to start sewing. So we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And it's important that it's really just a small 1/4 inch seam allowance because this is going to fit pretty snugly. So you're going to start up here, back stitch, sew all the way around, down, over, back, come back here, and back stitch here. We want to pin it as we go so nothing slips. Okay, so now that you're done and you've backstitched here, what you're going to do is through this hole, you're going to turn the whole thing right side out. And sometimes you're right. If you reach across to like the far corner and pull that through, yeah, then you'll see that you can turn it right side out pretty easily. Okay, so once you have turned it right side out, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the iron, and what we'll do is we're going to poke out the corners, and we like to use a purple thing. There's a couple different things you can do. We're going to poke out the top corners, and we're going to give it a good press. Okay, so a couple things. When we're turning this inside out, we trimmed off some excess on the inside there. The reason for that is you don't want all of that bulk in there because this is going to be fairly snug as it is. We want it to be snug because the whole idea is we want it to protect the Chromebook. So we did trim off some excess in there, and then we used our purple thing to be able to poke out all of our corners. You just come in, or if you have a chopstick or an eraser, you know, something that you can poke things through so that you have these nice crisp corners. And then all you have to do is we're just going to fold this over and fold this over just to be able to See what that looks like? That looks like that nice finished edge right there. And then we're just going to go ahead and press that. So we're just going to hold that down so that that way when you go to sew it, it'll stay right there where it goes. And then what you're going to do is where you did this nice top stitch here, you're going to do the same thing up here. You're going to do a top stitch up here.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to go back over to the sewing machine. We're going to pin this and we're going to sew this down. We'll cut that thread. Okay, there's one last thing. Can you tell what the last thing is to do?
Put the last piece of Velcro on.
Yes. So where do you think that Velcro is going to go?
Right.
That's right. So it's going to go right up here. And then what will happen is you can just kind of measure and you can sort of see where that's going to go. So it's going to go right there. And we'll just put a little pin in it, or we can put a little clip just to hold that. And it's going to come right up here next to this edge. So see how you've got that little stitched edge right there? That'll help you to kind of see right where it goes.
I feel like this one's going to be a little harder because it's not like that one.
That could be, yeah. All right, so we're going to start right there. We'll put your presser foot down. There you go. Notice. Okay, take your thread, and then, yeah, just go ahead and clean it up a little bit. It looks like you've got some threads here, some threads here. Find any of those little guys and trim those off. All right, here it is. So to put the Chromebook in, the other thing that we want to mention is that we did make this pretty snug because we wanted to make sure that this would really take a hit, right? If you drop it, because you're hauling this around back and forth to school, if you're sort of nervous about that 1/4 inch seam allowance, you really could make it 13.5 inches instead of 13 inches if you want a little extra room. But we think that it's kind of nice when it's nice and snug. So good job, Eliza. So we hope you enjoyed sewing with us today. We certainly had a really good time. And in fact, so much so that we've decided to start a new series called Projects for Beginners. So we're going to sew every week for 8 weeks, and we're going to start our series next week. Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.